Hey everybody, how you doing? Thank you all very much for visiting our live streams yesterday. I asked Zenny 62 Media NFL Draft expert Bill Carroll here and an HBCU college talent expert as well to come on and talk about the impact of the scintillating Colorado TCU game where Colorado, coached by Deion Sanders, won 45-42. I made a video yesterday, a live stream, asking if this means that there will be a run on HBCU talent. To this point now, it has been seen, I believe, over 10,000 times. So I asked Bill to come in and, finish the equation. Bill, what do you think about what Deion did, first of all, which I thought was amazing, and its impact on HBCU football going forward?
Sure. Here's the thing that first jumps out at you is how much the skill position talent, particularly speed at skill positions, has been upgraded like that, right? Nobody has ever had this rapid a turnover in a roster at the collegiate level. So to put it in perspective, 76 of the 85 scholarship players are players that weren't there last year. 39 out of 44 players on the 2D are players that weren't there last year. Trevor Wells is one of a handful, and there's like literally a handful who have made it through. And of those players, while there's certainly some high school, including some terrific high school players, the running back you saw go a little bit crazy in that game and set some freshman records for the conference even, came obviously up from high school. In fact, reclassified, graduated from high school a semester early in order to be there. But I'm going to break down the transfer portal stuff first. So on the current team that you just saw, 49 of the players were transfers in this past season on that current roster. They brought in 1 5-star. They brought in 5 4-stars, 42 3-star recruits. They also obviously lost a fair number of players as well. And then an adjusted NIL value of about $146,000. And they added, there's going to be an addition of about $3 million coming in the future, right? They're going to, they're already generating more NIL interest, as you might well imagine with what just happened. So they're going to go from being a very low-level Power 5 in terms of NIL deals to probably mid-level and then eventually towards the top. Because in the Rocky Mountain region, they don't have a lot of competition, quite frankly, for eyeballs. They've got the Denver Broncos, they've got the Avalanche in hockey, the Colorado Rockies, and the Nuggets. But for football, the only real no offense to Colorado State and School of Mines and Western of Colorado, a few others, but for big-time college football, Colorado State is very much the little brother, if you don't mind that analogy. And if you do mind it, it's still true. Colorado State is definitely seen as a tier below Colorado in terms of both their interest in terms of sports fans and interest in terms of people who want to invest in terms of NIL deals. They are far out in front. And having, of course, Deion Sanders is a big help because what's your sales pitch to somebody who's looking to do an NIL collective? We have Deion Sanders. Next question. Right. You don't even really have to follow up after that. You just sort of say, look, there's Deion Sanders, and be like, oh, where do I sign? And so that's why you're going to see this real uptick. Already you've seen it, but you're going to see a continual uptick in terms of NIL coming in. You're going to see players, particularly players that play things like, let's say you are a top flight FCS wide receiver or cornerback, and you think you might be looking for a chance to move up to the FBS level. Right at the top of your list is going to be Colorado. Even if you are a reserve at a Power 5, if you're a reserve at Alabama or Florida State, if you're a reserve at Miami, if you're a reserve at Southern Cal, if you're a reserve at lots of places, and you see what Deion's doing, everybody paid attention, right? I mean, everybody, Ryan Clark, everybody, Booger, everybody ever had a tweet at some point about that game. So this game's critical mass is large in the football world. So my prediction is that you'll see at least another 5 or 6 4-stars by this time next year who have committed to transfer to Colorado. You'll see another 7 or 8 4-star high school recruits who will who will be committing to Colorado out of high school. You'll see at least 1 or 2 5-stars coming out of high school, and maybe another 5-star recruit who's coming via the transfer portal. So probably 3 5-stars, which would be the most 5-stars they've had at Colorado on one campus at one time, going back to the Bill McCartney era. You have to go back literally to the 1990s. So he's already there's been a sea change. And if they continue to win, now this is just one game, and I don't want to overvalue what one game means, but confidence and momentum do mean something. And when you are teaching a new culture, you're inculcating a new culture, building from almost the ground floor a new culture. When he came in there, they needed an upgrade in terms of how they approached conditioning. Well, look at how well conditioned that team was. Look at how strong they were down the stretch, including a young man who played 129 snaps, Dave Travis Hunter. No questions about conditioning and strength, right? While they are a little bit undersized in air quotes by, top football standards in terms of some of their offensive and defensive line, particularly in the interior, there was no lack of strength, no lack of mobility, right? And the easiest thing to do is to get bigger, right? I mean, in terms of, as an athlete, getting stronger, getting faster, but getting bigger is not hard. You just eat more, right? And continue to do your workout routine. You're going to see that team in another year, and they're going to be better than people thought this year, including me. They're already better than I thought they'd be this year, but they're going to be even better next year because his culture, his players, his approach will be even further established come this time next year. So could they be a legitimate contender in the Big 12 sooner rather than later? I'm saying yes to that. I think that you will need to manage your expectations a little bit this year. That's a thrilling win. And obviously, this TCU isn't last year's TCU, particularly on defense.
Mm-hmm.
But they're going to win some shootouts, right? They're not great on defense either. Frankly, that's not a great defense either. That's why they're giving up points. They both were giving up points. But they could have scored even more points than they did. They had some drop touchdowns. They had some silly mistakes, which you expect from game one. When they hammer some of those things out, and some of their players, they had a couple of players they held out of that game that are important, including Anton McCaskill, who was to be their projected starter at running back. That's why they were playing the freshman, was because Anton McCaskill was being held out. So they're going to have even better depth of talent in the next game. So I'm revising upwards all of the things that I thought about this team. And they could be bowl eligible as soon as this year. They could be a team that makes it to a bowl game as soon as this year. They won't look this good every week. But no, that's just not how football works, right? You're going to have ups and downs, ebbs and flows. But you can tell already by this team's approach, by how much teams struggle to keep up with them. Sean Lewis, speaking of people that are going to be there for a good time but not a long time, to quote Drake, he was a terrific young head coach on the rise who left Kent State to take a coordinator position with Deion because he believed in Deion that much. Deion brought Mike Zimmer back, right? Look at Dennis Thurman. Look at his coaching staff. His coaching staff is incredible.
Warren Sapp. He's got Warren Sapp.
Right. Speaking of depth of talent.
What?
Speaking of depth of talent, Mike Irvin came and worked with the receivers a little bit. Like, guys come through that would not come through to Colorado in the past. Let's be honest about that as well. And the administration is way more all in. He's getting support in a way that they weren't getting in the past because people believe, right? He is a terrific example of what belief can do for a program, because they went from struggling to give away tickets sometimes. There were games, particularly like out of conference games, where they'd have like, get a car wash, here's 2 Colorado tickets. I mean, I'm not even really joking. Like, it was like that. The bars would run, campus town bars would run specials where if you bought X number of whatever's, here's some tickets, that kind of thing. Well, that's gone. That's gone. And because Deion is a brilliant businessman, he gets a percentage of gate, right? So
I didn't know that. Wow.
Because he's a brilliant businessman. Huh. So yes, he is getting a percentage of gate. So they're selling out, and they're going to continue to sell out, and Deion's going to get a piece of that, and he deserves it. Wow. Because the reason they're selling out is Deion, right? Because they didn't have. It's sort of like being a movie star who says, "I know you can't give me all of my fee up front, So I'm going to take points on the back end. That's essentially
Yeah.
what Deion did.
So you
He's
mean
like
to
an
tell
executive
me
producer.
that they signed this deal, probably even in their own heads, not thinking that what was going to transpire did, and so basically thought they would humor him by giving him a percentage. I would bet that was their thought process.
I think they thought it would take longer. I don't. I mean, I, I'm a person that believes in Deion, and I thought it would take longer. So anybody who had even the slightest bit of doubt was thinking, okay, this is like a 3-year process. No, it's going to be like a 3-week process. Now they're going to, once again, just because of the newness and because of some of the things, and they lack depth at a couple of positions, they're going to have some bad weeks also. But they're going to win some thrilling upsets. This won't be their last one. There's going to be another one or
Let's
two of
talk
these.
about that. They have I want to focus on that primarily because I happen to get their schedule, and this is what it looks like next. You've got Nebraska. So Nebraska's a home tilt, and I
Yeah.
would be shocked if they didn't blow out Nebraska. The
Yeah,
reason is
Nebraska's in trouble. If you watch Nebraska, Matt Rule has a tough row to hoe. When Nebraska was at its very best, they dominated all the Midwestern kids that didn't go to Iowa, pretty much, or maybe Kansas State. But Kansas State really worked the junior colleges. But high school, the high school kids from the upper Midwest, pretty much lock, stock, and barrel, ended up going to Nebraska in the old days. I mean, when Bob Devaney and Tom Osborne built that unstoppable machine that they were getting players from Minnesota, Iowa. They were getting players from obviously Nebraska, Kansas, but they were also getting the second and third best players from Texas. They were getting the second and third, as long as the best players even out of New Jersey. Remember, they got Irving Fryer out of New Jersey. They got Mike Rozier out of New Jersey. So they had a New Jersey pipeline. They had, which is very strange to think about, but they did. They got a lot of kids out of California also. Salinesi, the Heisman Trophy winner, Rashaan Salam. They got talent from, and of course, Colorado. Obviously, they got talent. Yeah, sorry, Rashaan Salam went to Colorado. Sorry, I'm getting Nebraska and Colorado mixed up. But they got Salinesi went to Colorado. I'm getting too mixed up. But they got good players out of Colorado also. But they got players out of California, Texas, but dominated the upper Midwest. So they were getting all the best players out of Kansas. They're mostly all the best players out of Kansas. They're getting the best players out of parts of Iowa, Minnesota, because Minnesota in those days wasn't very good. So if you were a really good football player in Minnesota, unless you wanted to go far, far away, which some did, some wanted to get the heck out of that part of the country, so they just got away. But if you wanted to stay in that part of the country and play high-level football, you went to Nebraska. If you wanted to stay, I mean, you had basically Iowa and Nebraska were your two choices if you're a big-time player in the upper Midwest. And before Boise emerged, they got a lot of those people that were from, until you got to like Brigham Young country. Utah and Brigham Young obviously sort of dominated parts of Washington, parts of, and of course dominated all of Utah. But a lot of those kids from parts of Idaho, a lot of those kids from parts of, the Dakotas before North Dakota State emerged, where were they going? They're going to Nebraska. So Nebraska has now run into a problem where they're no longer a national recruiter, at least not really a successful national recruiter, might be a better way to put it. So they're no longer getting even the third and fourth best kids out of California and Texas. The New Jersey pipeline dried up might work as well many years ago. They're not getting even the third best out of Florida, right? A lot of those young people are ending up at Appalachian State as opposed to going to, or West Virginia as opposed to going all the way to Nebraska.
wow.
So Nebraska is a place that isn't super attractive on the NIL front. Also, they've got some real challenges, like some very legitimate challenges. Now, I do think at some point they will get better, but I don't think they're ever going to go back to 10, 11 win seasons, challenging for national championships, unless something drastically changes. Because all the changes that are going on now with the transfer portal, all the changes that are going on now with NIL are things that work against Nebraska and not for Nebraska. So when they do get good players, those players are going to very often end up being siphoned off by other programs.
So now I got to ask you real quick about, you got Colorado State. Next, then you've got after Nebraska, and you've got Oregon and USC. I mean, that's a lineup right there that'll make you stop and say, "Whoa!" And that's just coming out the gate, right?
Yep.
Given what we saw against TCU, now what do you think of these matchups?
Well, I mean, I still think that both Oregon and USC will still have a decided advantage on them.
Mm-hmm.
But Colorado, I thought they'd beat Colorado State even before I saw this. Like I had that penciled in as a win even before. Colorado State is another program that's a bit in transition. I think that Coach Jay Norvell, will eventually have success there, but he's having to rebuild that program from a significantly challenged level, and they're struggling for some of the same reasons I just told you about Nebraska. But they don't even have like all the mystique and history of a place like Nebraska. They're fighting the little brother syndrome, right? They're the number 2 program in the state. They don't have a tremendous amount of NIL activity, and once again, when they do have good players, very often those players will look to transfer to other programs, including Colorado, right? I mean, already they had to compete with Colorado before. Even when Colorado wasn't good, it was still seen as the more prestigious program. Now it's the sexiest program anywhere in that part of the country with a lot of room to spare. You know, no offense to North Dakota State or whoever else you want to mention, but all those, I mean, but anybody in the Rocky Mountain region who's a pretty good football player definitely has Colorado near the top of their list. And once again, kids in California, Florida, and Texas are adding them to their list as we speak.
I got to ask you, you told me the TCU running back tried
right.
over to Deion, right?
Right. So when Deion was announced as the new head coach, it didn't take long, right? The ripple effect started making its way through a lot of programs, and TCU is a good program. I mean, they once again they played in the champ series just 1 year ago. So while they are in a rebuild, not a reload, just because they are the kind of program that needs to rebuild. They're not Alabama and LSU, but they're a good program. And Coach Dykes, as I don't just tell you, I mean, you probably ran into him in his days at Cal, is a good coach.
Yep.
And he's a guy that people want to play for, particularly, wide receivers and quarterbacks. A lot of people have done well for themselves, but in the sort of running back battle, you had Trey Sanders at TCU. When he left Alabama, one of the first people he reached out to was Deion Sanders and said, Coach, do you have a spot for me? And Deion probably answered in his DMs. Deion didn't tweet back in public. But I'm assuming he said, hey, right now I'm full up, but if something happens, I'll let you know, or something. I mean, I'm assuming. I don't know what he answered that. But I'm assuming he tried to keep him on the line, in case he didn't get somebody or something happened or whatever. But it didn't work out because, once again, there's a scholarship limit. And Trey Sanders is not a guy who's going to come as on a partial, or he's not going to come as a preferred walk-on. He's going to get a full scholarship a lot of places. But the running back battle between Trey Sanders and Dylan Edwards was fascinating because Dylan Edwards, of course, is just a freshman. And, a guy, like I said, who not reclassified, but graduated at the mid-year so he could get to college earlier and compete. And that's one reason he looked so prepared, is because he took a bunch of classes over the summers and loaded up credit-wise so he could finish as a mid-year senior out of high school.
Now, do you think, okay, let's go to USC.
I can no longer hear you.
You can't?
Not sure what just happened.
Really?
I see your lips moving. I bet what you're saying is absolute gold. I'm going to guess that you're asking me to follow up about what this means in the future for guys like 4-star recruits and things like that. So Trey Sanders and players like him are going to continue, right? I told you, they got a couple of 4-stars. They're going to double that number, right? That number is going to double. His number of top flight recruits is going to double. He's going to end up with a numbers issue in the future, right? Because he's recruiting well at the high school level, and then he's going to have a bunch of guys wanting to transfer from if you're at a Pac-12 school, well, Pac-2 school or whatever you want to call it now, if you're at Stanford or you're at Oregon State or you're at Washington State, and you're familiar with Colorado because you played against them, and now they're a very different Colorado from the one you used to slap around. You're putting them on your short list if you're looking to transfer. The Big 12 is going to, as Colorado rejoins it, after I guess a 16-year or whatever layover. Oh, USC. Okay, good. I'll answer questions about that. That's first of all, bet the over if you're a betting person. Both teams have some challenges on defense. I think that you're going to see on display the present and the future at the quarterback position because, Shedeur conceivably could come out this year. I think he may come back for one more year. Not so much because of where he is mentally, but where he is physically. If you look at he and Caleb staying next to each other, you could see the body difference, particularly in the lower body, right? Caleb Williams has the lower body of running back, right?
I can ask you,
strong.
Can you hear me now? Powerful. Can you hear me now?
Okay, I'm gonna try to guess at what you said.
Oh, I said
try to guess it.
You
I'm
can't
still
hear
not hearing you for some reason. I'm not sure, but I'm gonna go into depth a little bit. USC also, as you saw them against San Jose State. Nevada obviously was a bit of an overmatch. You didn't see those weaknesses, but you saw that you could run against them on the interior. You saw that they could be attacked both in the flats and over the middle. Now, deep outside the hashes, they're actually pretty decent. They have a good bunch of corners. Not to say that you can't still do some business because Shedeur Sanders has such good ball placement. If I were comparing him to somebody from the last draft, it'd probably be C.J. Stroud, right? A guy who can run but doesn't want to run and has exceptional ball placement. CJ was a little bigger, but Shedeur, like I said, still growing into his body a little bit. The thing that I think will turn the tide probably for USC is that they can wear down TCU a little bit, the same way that TCU wore down. I mean, the same way that Colorado wore down TCU. I think USC can wear down Colorado on defense a little bit. That's the one place where I worry about Colorado is their defensive line depth is not amazing. Now, they got a lot of players, like I said, through the transfer portal, and there's a bit of a drop-off between their first and second team, which is to be expected anywhere, but especially on a team that's basically rebuilding on the fly. Obviously, they have one of the best corners anyone's ever seen recently in Travis Hunter, and I'm hoping that they are careful with how they manage his snaps. Okay, here we go. I'm going to answer that question carefully so that we don't get in some sort of trouble. But evolutionary biology tells you that once someone is established that they are the alpha, there will be a certain amount of new attention that's directed their way. So once you've shown that you are the hunter that brings in the biggest beast, once you've shown that you are the one who ends up, winning the battle for the flag or whatever term you want to use, there will be certain, from an evolutionary biology standpoint, certain things that happen, certain benefits, certain changes take place at that point. I will answer the question that way. During, before, and after, my friend. Yes, that's why you lift all those weights, to quote Bill Parcells. So there is always a game within the game, and sometimes the game within the game and game after the game are not just about football, my friend. So there's going to be an upgrade in many parts of the lives of the players. I don't know about all that. I think she may have just decided that I'm going to drop this zero and get with a hero. I mean, that's sometimes what happens. That's how the cookie crumbles, my friend. That's why people, adopt certain lifestyles and do certain things. Hey, that once again, if you want to be the man, you got to beat the man. And sometimes when you beat the man, you get what the man used to have. Colorado is a program on the rise. And I mean, that's not really saying much at this point. I think everybody now knows that. The people who doubted it before or whatever I will give credit to the people that come out and say I was wrong, right? And I was wrong. I mean, I was telling people this game would be close, and it was. But I definitely thought that TCU would sort of pull away towards the end. And I was very impressed with the difference in this Colorado team in terms of ability to finish games, because they weren't the worst team on the field in all of those games they lost last year. They lost 11 games last year. They should have won a couple more of those games, but they didn't know how to finish games. They didn't. They didn't know how to win. They didn't know how to finish. They now clearly have a better term. Run the table. Well, I don't think they can run the table. No, that would be a lot to ask. But I mean, Oregon and USC still have advantages over them at a couple of key positions. What I will say is those games will be much closer. So if you were one of those smart futures bettors who put your money down when the lines were what they were preseason, you are going to do very, very well for yourself. Very well. If you bet the over on 5 wins for Colorado, you're going to do very well for yourself. If you bet that they were going to cover in almost all these games, you're going to do very well for yourself. They're going to lose a couple of games, but they will not get blown out. I don't think they get blown out by anybody. I think they won't lose by more than maybe 10 to 13 points against anybody. The thing that I will warn you against, and everybody, it's a 1-game sample. Everybody's all excited. But they play a lot of their best players a lot. Okay? It's not just Travis Hunter. I mean, he plays a ludicrous number of snaps, but a lot of their best players play a lot of snaps. And what happens is 2 things. One is fatigue makes you more susceptible to injury, or just making mistakes. So I think that 7-8 weeks into the season, you're going to see them maybe lose a game or 2 just due to fatigue. But the good news is reinforcements are coming. Like, people won't forget this game. You're going to see the depth of talent increase this year and then the year after next. And then 4 years from now, they won't have places for all the good players. Like, they won't. They'll be in the position of losing good players to other programs because they won't have room for them all. And that's really a problem you want to have, because Alabama has that problem, but it doesn't seem to bother them too much. Once again, Trey Saunders is a great example of that, right? A former Alabama player. So that you want to get to the place where you don't have room for all your good players. Colorado's not there yet, but they will be there soon.
Okay, can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Can you hear me talk?
I still can't hear you,
Okay. All right.
I'm not sure why. You can hear me apparently, though.
I can hear you.
Going on with this.
Okay.
But I will proceed. I will let you fire off questions, and I will vamp, as we say in the business. To me, the thing that you're going to want to look for is, can they develop? Well, I mean, like I said, I think they're going to lose at least 3 or 4 games. The ones that jump out to me, once again, we just talked about both USC and Oregon. Those are teams that just have greater depth at virtually any position you want to point to. There's a greater depth. I would say they're equal to Colorado in talent and above them in talent at every position except maybe corner, right? Because nobody else has Travis Hunter. But they have good corners. Excuse me. They have very good corners. Just not Travis Hunter good, because nobody has Travis Hunter good. That's not a thing that you can have. But they're just going to be able to lean on people in a way. So here's what I'm going to walk you through. Colorado State is clearly a win. Arizona State is going to be interesting. I think they can beat Arizona State. I wasn't sold on this before, but now I think they can. Once again, that'll be another shootout, though. Oregon, I think Oregon just has too much for them. And let's see. I think they beat Stanford. Once again, I picked them over Stanford before. I still think UCLA will be a game that they lose, but it'll be close. So that's UCLA. I'll put Arizona State in the win column. Oregon, USC. So those are 3 losses. Oregon State will be interesting. I literally right before we got on watched Oregon State. They're a good team. That'll be a good game. That'll be a great game, in fact. That will be the real measuring stick. If they beat Oregon State, then they're in a bowl game. To me, that's the one that tells me they're a bowl team. I think they'll beat Arizona. I think they'll lose to Utah. In fact, I think people are still too low on Utah. Utah, I think, could be a team that contends, that ends up in the Final Four. I think they beat Washington State. So the losses to me are Utah, UCLA, USC, and Oregon. So they have a legitimate chance to win 8 games. That's almost double what most people were expecting.
Now,
TCU lost a lot of players, Eddie. I mean, they lost their top 2 receivers. They lost their starting quarterback. They lost 3 offensive linemen in the last draft. They lost their top 2 pass rushers in the last draft. They lost their best corner guy, which is Tre'Davious Hodges-Tomlinson. That's LT's nephew. So they lost their best players at almost every position to the draft. So, and they're not Alabama. They don't just reload. They have to recruit and develop. They're more like Virginia Tech when Virginia Tech was good. Virginia Tech could be really good, and then they would have to be not as good for a couple of years, but they got good again. That's the kind of program they are. They're a 2- and 3-star program for the most part, with the occasional 4-star. So TCU will be good again, but it'll take another couple of years. They're not those teams that, like I said, I mean, they're not LSU, they're not Alabama, they're not, well, now Georgia has to be added to that list, where they just have just a stack of great players. They have really good players, a sprinkling of great players, and they develop some of those good players into very good, some of those very good into greats, but it takes a couple of years. Like I said, the most impressive thing to me about Colorado was how well they held up late in the game. If they continue to show they can finish out games like that, that'll help them against good teams like Oregon State and Arizona State that are about even with them now, right? USC and Oregon are still above them. Utah is still above them. That's where you're going to really see them be exposed a little bit, because Utah is brutal. I mean, I don't know if you watch Utah, but they just pound on you.
yeah,
They
do.
are.
Yeah,
and once again, without Florida, when you look at it, at Florida, without their starting quarterback, they came away with a win. They are that kind of team. They're basically Wisconsin, but in Utah. They are a team of a bunch of big, angry men who just hit and wail on you. They have a bunch of Samoan dudes that you don't want to see. They're a tough team. So I'm just letting you know now that enjoy this hot run, whether in some of these sort of more finesse teams. When they get to teams like Utah, they're going to be exposed a little bit. But they're going to win their share of games. So 7-8 wins is completely doable.
And he is Bill Carroll. Thank you, Bill.
Yes.
Cool.
Okay, Zenny, I will hang around. I think you said hang around after, and I will do so.
All right, cool. All right. Thank you, everybody. And I'm not sure where to go.
Yes, thank you, everyone who joined us. And we'll do this again probably next week.
Yeah.
Yes, in 1 week. I believe
don't go anywhere. That ends this broadcast.
Okay. And he strung up the W, West Side. No, Wu-Tang. One or the other.